what's your assessment of the tensions now, the harsh words being exchanged by the senators and Chinese embassy officials? Is it time for the ambassador to go?
To be honest, medyo surprised ako dito with the turn of events. For the sake of transparency, actually, I had the opportunity to have a meeting with the new Chinese ambassador just the other month before I headed back here to Oxford. And the sense I got from that meeting, it was a very comprehensive 1 to 2 hour conversation. It was very constructive. It was very, I would say, I was very honest and very clear about where the Philippines stands and what to expect and what not to expect. To be fair to the new Chinese ambassador, he has a background in Washington, D.C., so he understands how democracies like ours operate. He understands their checks and balances, their separation of powers. He understands the complexity of communication and sensitivity of communication. And he's someone who has made it very clear that stabilization, not a golden age of bilateral relationship, but a stabilization of relationship is something important for him. At the same time, of course, as you can see with Secretary Lazaro of Department of Foreign Affairs, you can see with President Marcos, also, they are committed to stabilization of bilateral relationship against the backdrop of a lot of uncertainty in the global geopolitical landscape, with Trump potentially engaging in yet another military activity, the rules-based order under pressure. But here we are. We have this world war, and I wonder if this is the advent of hindi na wolf warrior, parang dragon warrior. I didn't have a chance to see the spokesman of the Chinese embassy, but it looks like the spokesman is the new dragon warrior and is really taking up on multiple figures, and probably didn't help that Ronald Llamas and some of our colleagues also joined the fray. But to be honest, because we're the ASEAN chair this year, I hope our senators and everyone keep in mind that we have to look all good also to the rest of ASEAN, meaning, yes, we have to stand by our rights. Yes, we have to push back against any kind of bullying. Yes, no one has a right to tell us what to say and what not to say, especially in our own country. But having said that, this is the year that we want all the major leaders to come to Manila. We want to have some movement on the code of conduct negotiations. We want to get ASEAN on our side. And to be honest, from outside the Philippines, some ASEAN countries are looking at it and saying, here go again the Filipinos, and everyone trying to score political points by making the Chinese a punching bag. Of course, I don't agree with that characterization, but we have to be sensitive also to how the rest of ASEAN will perceive the situation.
Okay, so how can cooler heads intervene? How can we dial down the exchange?
Well, it takes two, or in this case, maybe three to tango. At least on the part of the Malacanang, they made it clear they don't want to be part of any world war, and I think it's quite important. You had the First Lady, Liza Araneta, being with the ambassador the other week, signaling that the first family, the administration is committed to stabilization, not a golden era, a stabilization of bilateral relationships just to make sure things don't get out of control. But I think both the spokesman of the Chinese embassy has to roll back this whole dragon warrior. I don't know if someone is trying to establish their street credentials now. They have to draw that back. And also for the senators and our good friends who have clearly, there's a principle behind what they're saying. They're right. I agree with what they're saying. But they have to take into consideration we're ASEAN chair this year. And the priority for our president is to make sure all world leaders will come, including President Xi Jinping, so that we can have some substantive discussion and move the conversation forward in the coming months as we host.
Richard, was your reading of the Chinese ambassador wrong? You said he was, more sober, but it doesn't seem that way based on what's going on.
I don't know how internally things operate. He's new, right? So I don't know if the spokesman is directly getting the talking points from the ambassador. I'm also not sure if this is like testing the waters, like how far can we go with this? And I won't be also surprised. We have a situation whereby, the head of state of Venezuela was just abducted the other month. The president of the United States is threatening Greenland and potentially threatening another military operation against another country in the Middle East. Probably there's some entrepreneurial diplomats out there, not necessarily ambassador, who feel that this is a time for China also to speak out and speak loudly. It's quite interesting that in neighboring Taiwan, we're also seeing a similar phenomenon, but in a sense that we didn't talk about the other side of the equation. The elements in the Philippines who are actually friendly to China, So one thing that I believe made this situation very revealing and very contentious is that you had a lot of senators who are known to be close to President Duterte and who are known to have very China-friendly point of view, to be honest. And I think that made the situation much more complicated. So maybe someone, maybe in China, thought, let's roll the dice and see who is going to be arguing in our behalf or who's going to be much more sympathetic to our position. Maybe someone wanted to muddy the water. So I think it's important for responsible senators and statesmen to make sure, not forget that we're ASEAN chair this year, and also not give a platform to certain points of view that may make China feel that, oh, we have allies anyways in the Philippine Senate, and probably we can push our narrative. So I think that's why we have to be aware of the bigger picture here, because it's sad to see that some of our senators seem to be more interested in arguing against our case rather than also questioning the loopholes in China's claims. Like, okay, we can debate about whether West Philippines is in Google Maps or not, but is the nine-dash line of China in the Google Maps? Or we can talk about our exclusive economic zone, but what have these senators said about what's happening in Scarborough Shoal? So I think it's actually quite worrying for me to see some of the senators coming out and more concerned about what we say against China than about what China is doing against us in the West Philippines. And that also exposes fault lines and weaknesses within our system.